Hey everyone, you are really going to enjoy the conversation I'm about to have with a dear friend of mine, Darryl Guy. He lives in Stockholm, Sweden, but he is an Aussie, a fellow Aussie like me. So let me give you a little bit of a background on what Darryl does. He's been doing this work for over 30 years, so he's definitely not a newcomer to the plant medicine world. But Daryl really works in the stuff that not most people want to work with. Most people in the light working industry want to work with all the light and fun stuff. Daryl works with spirit extraction, exorcisms, energetic alignments, all of those kind of juicy things that most people want to prefer aren't necessary, but they absolutely are. He works with the Hara line. If you know anything about that, we'll probably have a bit of a conversation about that today. Seed of the Soul, Core Star. He's really, he clears spaces, whether it's houses, buildings, sacred land, if there's old energy, heavy energy, negative energy, unwanted spirits, entities, souls who haven't passed over, all those kind of things. That's Daryl's absolute cup of tea. He also works in soul retrieval, deeper psychological work, soul flight, spiritual counseling, healing, one-on-one sessions. He does remote sessions. So anywhere you are in the world, he's very, very helpful at helping you clear stuck, unwanted energy, out of alignment kind of stuff. It's been very helpful for myself, especially when I travel a lot and I tend to bring home a bit of unbalanced, unwanted energies. He's very helpful, always helps me get back on track, get back into the scene, as well as, we're doing ceremonies, San Pedro, mushrooms, ayahuasca, all of those wonderful plant medicine things. So anyway, that's Daryl. We're going to have a great old chat about what changes are happening in the dimensions, what he has discovered energetically, which has been amazing. He actually did a healing on myself, and it was incredible. Had very, very profound results for me in that moment, and that was last year. So we're very keen to help other people to get this out into the world and let you know what areas of your energetics we need to be focused on and working on and aware of. Please, if you have gotten this far in your viewing, and of course you're interested in going further, or you've watched a couple of my videos, it would be fantastic if you could subscribe, like, share, comment, all of those wonderful things. That helps me know that you're interested in me continuing doing this work. It also helps YouTube know that I'm being watched and that I exist, which would be really nice because I do enjoy sharing this information with you. So any kind of comments would be wonderful, liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you so much. I would really appreciate that. So, as introduced to you, Daryl, I have already done a bit of an intro with everyone, explaining that we've done this a couple of times. We've known each other a while, and you've helped me out many times when I've come back with imbalances and all sorts of other critters. So, welcome back.
Thank
Um,
you. Good to be back, Charlie. Always a pleasure to speak and talk.
yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, no, I love our chats. And so, so first up, I did already explain a little bit about the work that you do and those kinds of things. So we might need to go back over that depending on what conversation we end up having. But I think the reason why you asked me to have this conversation was because you were really strongly guided that we have some really vital information to share with people. And I can say that from my own experience of the session that I had with you last year, where you said you had, come across some new things that needed to be cleared, and that it was really important to start sharing that with people. So I want to hand over to you and help you kind of explain that so that people really understand what they need to be looking out for and what this means for us.
What it means is, okay. So essentially, as a shaman, it's always good. We get a lot of training. We have our teachers, we have our plants, but I have a healing team that work with me which are dimensional. And so when they told me to step away from my traditional training because there was a bigger picture for work, it was okay. So what's coming next? Because I'm very simple man, traumas, plants, and demons, easy life, very easy life. So I was quite interested to understand what was now being presented. At this point in time, the frequencies are really raising up massively. Our 3D dimension is changing. The other dimensions are able to access our 3D dimension a lot easier now than probably ever before. And people are starting to literally like the wake up story. So where it all began was my guides, my healing team were introducing me to what they called the bandwidth. And they said it was described as a bandwidth because it was an abstract concept to try and get my head around. So the bandwidth you can dial, you can go up and down the dial like the old radio stations. So that was the basic setup. And then I asked about the structure, and the structure was deemed in frequency. And the frequency was at one end is green, which is the conditional love. Then it moved to pink. Then it moved to silver. Then it moved to gold. And on the other side of the gold is a bright white, sparkly white. So sitting on this bandwidth, and I asked, what is the signature of the energy? And I was told very clearly, humans call it love. So there you are with the green, the conditional love, you know, the love of envy and jealousy. But then you have love for more than you, which is the pink energy. Then there's the silver, and then the gold and the white. I'm like, so what is the silver love? And it came up as being like a galactic love, for the want of a better expression. Then the gold was universal love, and the bright white sparkly white was divine love. So I'm like, okay, so now what are the mechanics of it? Why is there a bandwidth, and what's it got to do with us? We're all connected to this bandwidth, which even though it was described as being love, I do understand it as also being consciousness. In the sense of one end you've got consciousness for yourself, and then the other end you've got the consciousness with the divine. So the silver part is where the world, what I would describe as the world of phenomena. So in the silver part is our aura, is our hara line. It's where the dimensional beings are. It's the place of magic and manifestation. And for this sort of talk, more really the point of the dimensional beings. So in the silver, you could say that the angels are in the silver, but the archangels will be in the gold. So at the end of the silver bandwidth, you've got the gold. The gold interfaces with the bright white sparkly white, or the divine. So up in that gold bandwidth, you've got like archangels, but more importantly, the lords of karma. So, and it's not a bad thing to be able to communicate with the lords of karma about stuff. So anyway, so we're bringing it back to the point. Now I asked them, what has this got to do with the work? And I was told that this is an overall picture. My work will come forward and it will be shown. So it really began last year with a client that I'd worked with online, and doing the catch-up call. I asked her how things were going, and everything was good, but she made the single little statement I'll never forget: there's still pressure on my third eye. And I'm thinking, okay, what did I miss? Because I'm on it, and I didn't know what it was, and she'd never mentioned it either as being part of an issue. So because I didn't know about it, I told her I'd go and do my homework, and the answer came back from the homework: possible abduction, ET implants, watch out. So the watch out, red flag to a bull. I'm like, hey, let's find out about this. And I got in touch with her and said, come in, we'll do an in-person session, because that was an online session. So as fate gets to be, she was in my hometown here in Stockholm, and so we were able to meet up. The night before, I was just laying on my spike mat, too much information, and have a bit of a meditation. And then I was now being told what was going to happen, how I would work, what would be done. And my question was, how long was it going to take? And I was told straight up 90 minutes. I put the timer on that session, 90 minutes and 14 seconds. So they know what they're talking about. Anyway, so basically what I found out is that we are dimensional beings. Like, we all know we're dimensional beings. We're caught on the visual bandwidth between, like, 300 and 750 or something like that. So we can't really see on that side or the other side of our vision. And there's a lot there that, like Charlie, and a lot of other people in ceremonies know, there's things there that we can't see visually here. But it doesn't mean that they're not there. How we're dimensional beings is that we have the 3D stuff, we have our chakras and aura, which is another dimension that is definitely there that some people can see. At a dimension deeper than that, there's the Hara line, which is above the head, goes through the body, anchors the core of the earth. So that's now at a dimension deeper than the aura. And a dimension deeper than that is the core star, or what I would consider the divine that's in everybody. And this is how we're dimensional. You know, people can kind of feel their aura, or they might walk into a room and they feel bad, or they feel that there's something wrong. That's a dimensional communication. They're actually accessing the dimensional aspect of being a human. And being in these wonderful, crazy times that we're in, with the frequencies raising up, we need to be able to ground the higher dimensions down to earth. We need to be grounded, more or less. So that's the general premise. So with this work, I was shown how to basically hunt from the edge of the aura through the aura. So example would be, you've got the base chakra, but it's going to go up. It could be a meter away. There could be 4 or 5 or 3 of these, what I call an aura implant, or an auric implant. So they're sitting in our energy field. Some people would recognize it as being like a kind of nanotech, as an implant, as opposed to a physical implant coming up on X-rays. These things are in the energy field. So as I started working and finding these things and doing the extraction work, then something came into the room. And it came into the room completely focused on the client and what was happening in the energy. It then kind of saw me. So it didn't see me straight away because it needed to come to the 3D. And the question was, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You know, I'm playing around with its work. And I explained, I'm here for the client. I'm here to help the client. I think you better go. And this thing was not a very nice looking entity, basically, dimensional being. So at the end of the session, which was quite full on, of finding multiple things, and especially with the third eye, for this client, there were 7 of these coming down, even to the point that it was very close. That pressure on the third eye, I've since come to understand a lot of people feel. That's one thing that a lot of people are aware of in their own life, and something that people have since come forward to express. I've got that pressure that you've spoken about. So at the end of the session, my client, who's been in all the plant ceremonies, not every single ceremony, but done all the plants that I work with, and she said straight up, how did you get it so deep without medicine? And my answer was, that's the work, you know. And then I said to her, how do you feel? And she's like, I feel good, but I've never been so terrified in my life. I've seen this woman go through some really heavy work in ceremonies. And so I'm now, what's scaring you? Why are you the most terrified? And her words were, I saw the abduction, which I didn't mention to her, and she described exactly what had come into the room. So what had done the work on her, it come to check me out and check out what's going on, why the work is playing up. I see them as almost like a remote, like a roller door, remote control roller door that can be worked on by distance, or activated by distance is maybe a better word. So that was the first one. And now I'm starting to question my own work and really the veracity of like what is real and what is not, because this is something we need to do all the time. And you know that too, Charlie. We need to figure out what's real and what's not, so we don't get, one, bluffed, but two, it's to be effective. So I explained to another friend. She understands. She's a very ET person. She understands, and within maybe 2 or 3 hours, I now have 2 bookings via her of distance sessions. So I do it by distance. The same thing happens, the same result, it works. I get a booking for an in-person session, and this is in the same week. So that's say Sunday and Monday. I get the in-person session Wednesday. And again, this is another client who's been in the different plants with me, and he said the same thing. How did you get it so deep without medicine? And wow, this is really strong. On the Thursday, I'm now wanting to try and understand the feedback they're giving me. So I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to do it for myself. Did it for myself, and it was a game changer, total game changer. The calmness that I felt afterwards hasn't left and has been very profound. For myself personally, things that would normally trigger me cease to exist. Things that maybe like consumables, like I would like soda, didn't want for it anymore. And my work became so much stronger and clearer because now I had none of these blockages. So that was on the Thursday. And then on the Friday, I had what I call my exam, which was 2 of the same sessions back to back with Anna B and Anna E. So working with the first Anna, I felt like a doctor with students, how the students sit up in the upper levels and watch the surgery, because there would have been a dozen or more of beings were in the room. After about, well, I think I got up to about the solar plexus, I could hear a whole lot of chattering around, and there were 3 or 4 different kinds of these beings just suddenly left. And then there was more chattering. And at that point, now I start talking to them and say, so you guys didn't even know what they were doing. And this comes under the line of like people talk about the reptilians and the Draco and things that are trying to hold back humanity in this respect. So by the end of that week, I've done enough on myself and with other clients to know that this is a really, one, it's needed, but 2, it wasn't bullshit work. You know, it wasn't just waving a feather around. And then proceeded to now go and offer it as sessions. Every time I do the work, beings come into the room. Like I said, I'm really simple, man. I'm not an ET person. I didn't understand how many different kinds of dimensional beings there are, let alone the fact that they're here now. They're just dimensionally deeper. And it sort of comes back when I did a mushroom ceremony sometime last year. I had a client laying down and her hand went up. And I couldn't see what was holding her hand. So I used my little trick and praying mantis at pop, and I could see a praying mantis. Looking at it in a little bit of disbelief, wondering, okay, so how am I going to work this now in the room? It turned around and looked at me and said, you can see me? And I'm like, yes. And it's gone, oh. And my question is, you can hear me? And it said, yes. And I'm like, oh. And what's going to happen? So I got my guy to check it out and there was no problems. It was welcome to stay. As soon as that was going down, her other hand then goes up. And I'm looking and looking. And now I recognize that there's our dimension. I'm seeing the praying mantis's dimension. but there's something there in another dimension that's not visible. So I used my little trick that I've been taught, pop, and it was the tall, blonde, Nordic kind, holding her other hand. And, and they were there for healing, for this person's healing. At the end of the ceremony, I'd asked her if she'd ever had a problem feeling human, and she sort of burst into tears and said, "I think I'm from up there," and pointed to the stars. And I'm like, well, you're probably pretty well right. This work is amazing in its results and how people feel. But for me, it's even more amazing because I'm starting to understand that there could be something 2 meters away from our physical body that's affecting our sense of well-being directly, which is also possibly why body workers miss it, because we're up on the body. We're not sitting at 2 meters away coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
So I'm just going to pause you there because that's a lot.
it's a lot of information. Yeah.
We just covered a lot of stuff, and a lot of that may be new for some people, but I just wanted to kind of capture it in ways that I think for some people coming into this, some people are quite new into the spiritual world and they're just getting a grasp on the fact that we have a spirit besides our human body. So the idea that there's dimensions and beings and all these other unseen things is still hard for people to grasp hold of. But I think the way that you've described it actually makes it more understandable, especially with using the bandwidth. It's kind of like saying, well, this is the consciousness that we're in, and there's different layers of bandwidth, there's different layers of dimensions, and those dimensional beings are only, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but this is kind of where my head's going. So those dimensional beings can only kind of be in certain layers, certain areas of bandwidth, probably depending on like their frequency or their something. Maybe that's a bit more unknown. I'm going to say frequency because it sounds like it makes sense.
Yeah.
But but the way that you were explaining it was like, there's the high level ones in the higher level spaces. And so I'm just kind of saying that is in a way for people to understand that it's like there's layers of dimension, layers of frequency, layers of energy that we all, it's kind of like we're all in it all the time, and we have to wake up to the fact that we are affected by these things, whether we know it or not, like whether we are aware of them, of their existence. And I think does that sound about right? I don't want to.
Yeah.
I know that there's more to it than that, but I just mean in that snapshot of what you said in the beginning part.
Yeah. To keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
That's the silver aspect of the bandwidth. It's completely dominated by the gold and the bright white, sparkly white.
Okay.
So the gold has been expressed to me that it cannot reach down to us at our end of yellow, of green and pink, until we reach our hand up to it.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of explains, in a way, religion. One of the great old books is the Barbara Ann Brennan books.
Oh, yeah.
And the Hands of Light, Light Emerging, and the Core Star Healing. Again, my guides are like, get out the Core Star Healing book. I opened it up, and there's a chapter on dimensional implants. So, so I started to read up on that. And this is where she expresses that the pink energy of unconditional love is what will get you through the silver or through the phenomena. These are my words. I'm not quoting her. So if we get into that pink energy, we can move our way through the silver part of the bandwidth to connect with the gold, which interfaces with the divine.
Right.
Here's, compassion, unconditional love. A premise of the positive aspects of religion is that you don't go back to the green where it's just about you. You go for the bigger than you. Compassion is a good one. People ask me what's spirituality. It's being nice to people you don't like, in a genuine way. You know, to me, that's spirituality. It's not how many good deeds you do, how many ceremonies you go to, or how much money you put in the plate. That's not compassion. So that silver aspect is where we're accessible. A lot of people get caught in that silver aspect, or in the world of what I call phenomena. And it's very easy because you go around, you know, with a spirit box and you start asking questions, then yeah, you get your answers, but you can't really discern what's there and what's giving you the answers. It's all coming from the spirit box. I have an old friend who's quite into that kind of stuff, and we'd have contact, and he'd sort of freak out that they're here trying to get an answer. They get an answer, and then they freak out and run. You know, it's like if you're going to knock on the door, don't be surprised when it gets opened, because we're all there. The fact that the divine and the golden will not interfere with what goes on in the silver, again, comes back to that premise of then the good guys don't interfere. You know, the benevolence won't make them manipulate, whereas what I would say the nefarious energies that are around are very much open to doing that.
Yeah, and it doesn't kind of come back to the fact that, I mean, really that's where prayers come from, right? Because it's like you have to ask if you want help. It's not just going to come automatically. It's not just going to be there and help you because you look like you. It's like you have to ask.
Yeah,
You know, it's kind of part of the basic foundation of learning in the spiritual world is, well, you have to explain what it is you want. You have to ask for the help. You have to go for guidance. They're not just standing around waiting to just jump in for you, because that would take the whole kind of point out of what we're learning, right?
yeah. Intention, straight up
Exactly.
intention.
Yeah,
You know, if you don't tell the universe what you want, the universe can't give it to you.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
I want a
exactly.
pizza. What kind of pizza? You know,
Yeah, exactly. Um,
so
so, so before we go into other stuff as well, I know there's more to this where we're going. So that's that kind of dimensional stuff. I did want to come back to so thank you so much for sharing the example of your clients. That really helps to kind of understand what does this mean for us as on a human level. And the idea that you're taking out, implants from different layers and different areas of our energy field is kind of, yeah, pretty mind-blowing. And I
yeah,
remember, of course, you have practiced this on me as well, and I had my own significant changes. So I'm also an example.
yep,
And I just thought maybe for people who are listening and thinking that maybe they've only just gotten into energy healing, and like you said, a lot of energy healers, we're working on the very kind of close proximity to our body, to our aura, thinking, oh yeah, okay. I mean, we know our aura can be quite large, but also we're really only working quite closely. Whereas now what you're saying is these are implants and things that are put in, much wider proximity, much bigger areas. Can you also perhaps explain a little bit as to, like, some people might be thinking, well, how do I know, or, where does this implant come from? And I know you talked a little bit about different beings, but can you explain that a little bit more?
okay. So I've doing on the job training more or less with this stuff. I found that healers and light workers probably have more of these than the normal everyday person. Um, I'm I made the joke to a friend that if we have these reptilian overlords that are pushing consumerism and it's killing the planet and there's all these kind of weird things attached to it, wouldn't it be in their best interest to put something in on around us that will make us then want to consume? And I only said that because I didn't want stuff anymore. Like, a simple one like soda. I'd walk past and wouldn't even think about it. Whereas before it was, oh, I'll go get one, I'll grab one. The same thing is popped up with another client, and that expressed the fact that they were going crazy in their head about buying a car, funnily enough. And then after the session, they realised that they didn't actually need the car and it was useless to get it. So that completely got taken off the table, which for them was 60% of their headspace every day. So also working with another client, I stopped counting at 53 of these things that were being taken out. She's a very strong healer, really, really amazing woman. She burst into tears for a good 20 minutes, and I know she was crying for that terrorized childhood that she'd had. Unfortunately, it seems as though when we're young, we're very susceptible to this. And it wasn't, I guess, until after I'd done the work that I had a memory for myself. And this is a memory before I was going to school, before school age, I should say. But at night, I would hide under my blankets and speak like a robot so that they didn't know I was a human child. I'd forgotten that for like 50-something years. And I'm thinking, is that when it happened to me? Was I accessed at that point and still had a memory somewhere? It's also been expressed that when we incarnate, on the way through from incarnation, which I dare would say divine gold, the gold is made the staging place where we come from. We need to come down through the silver and the pink and the green to get to here. And on the way down, we get interfered with in not a good way, but we get worked on for these implants. People have asked me, do they come back? As far as I understand so far, no. Once they're out, they've stayed out. And I've checked 3 or 4 clients just out of my own interest to see if these things would still be there. One client described it as being her spirituality was like window shopping. She couldn't touch it. And with these things gone, all of a sudden it's in her lap. And now she's doing all these things that she could only sort of look at through the window. These are the effects and how they can influence, or how they can be of how they work on the humans, how we respond is probably a better word. To me, I'm almost trying to find another vocabulary to describe this, because it's very new work for me, even though it's been about a year now doing it. But the whole concept is amazing, to be honest. To think that we could have nanotech, or we could have these things 2 meters away from us and not even know it through our whole life, let alone know that it'd make us unhappy, it'd make us hunt things that we don't necessarily need, or it could make us be triggered by things that are external influences, and us not being able to understand the trigger or what's doing it, thinking it's our problem all the time, when it actually maybe not be our problem, it's a problem that's been put onto us.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and it's really helpful. I think also just something else that you talked about, and I think it was just part of your conversation, but I wanted to bring it up because I think that because there's so much going on, as you and I, we both know, there's so much going on in the world today, spiritually. I don't think a lot of people realize that it's really a dimensional and spiritual war that's already happening. Like, people talk about a physical war that they're worried about, when they actually don't realize that that's actually already happening. That's what we're dealing with, is this energetic. I mean, war is, maybe a bit dramatic of a word, but in the sense
It's
of
a
it's a
battle.
battle of it's a battle of imbalance, of one trying to override the other. So,
Yep.
and I'm just and the reason why I wanted to go back on this is because, I try to keep up with what a lot of different people are saying, and I use my discernment a lot, because I'm also incredibly aware that there's a lot of messages trying to come through to influence people based on this fear, to get them
Yep.
to go, oh no, everything's amazing, and it's all this is happening, without understanding that you still need to be very conscious of the fact that we can be drawn into the wrong stories and the wrong way of,
Yep.
as you're now saying to us, these different dimensional beings that, they're fighting over Earth still.
Mhm.
Um, and I just felt like that could do with a bit more of a conversation for people, because not in a fear-based way at all, but by
Mhm.
any means, it's more to kind of empower us with the knowledge of saying, don't become complacent with the idea that it's just all focused on who's running the country and, oh yes, all these beings are coming to help us, but it's to also remember that we need to be diligent about what we do and how we protect ourselves.
Yep.
I know that's not really a
The
question, but I know that you can talk a lot about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's when people talk about the battle that's going on, it really comes down to control and power. Like we're in the 3D, we have an awful lot of power in the dimensional world. We have more power than we know. Like with entities and deems and things like that, they will try and influence us so that we're powerless. But really, we have dominion because we are the physical beings. Um, we're connected from one end of the bandwidth to the other, whereas other dimensional entities are only probably up to the end of the silver and not even probably wanting to go near the gold. What I would think maybe 3 or 4 years ago as being entities or demons, I would now really be reclassing as being dimensional beings. And I won't say aliens, because aliens sort of actually limit the perception of it, because there's a vast array of beings out there. When we're not diligent and when we're a little bit ignorant and complacent, we become the low-hanging fruit. And we're easy to get. We're easy to get. I remember you expressing once that the fact that the demons are like, you guys make it easy for us. Look how you live. Look how you act. Look at the vibration that you give out. You make it easy for us. This is what it sort of comes down to again. I'm not saying, oh, you're going to go to bed tonight and aliens going to come in and be scared of what's under your bed. No, not at all. Firstly, be aware that you have more power than you realize, for the simple fact you have a physical body. You can tell things to leave your space. You have dominion, they will have to leave. They might come back and pester you, but you can always tell them to go again. How we live our lives, like some religions or some ideologies would call it morals, that those morals are actually frequency based. You can either be a very low frequency, or you can act accordingly and be in a higher frequency. And everybody knows the difference between being pissed off and being so happy you can't stop laughing. There's a very big difference in emotion, but it's that general feeling of heaviness as well. I haven't heard anybody complain about laughing for 20 minutes, but I know how people feel when they've been crying uncontrollably for 20 minutes. And again, that fits on that bandwidth. Dimensionally speaking, we're connected to God. God is connected to us. We're connected to the universe. It's connected to us, whichever way you want to call it. But it's also free will about how far you want to go to get there. A lot of what I understand is that, yes, we can go through the silver, but it's also easy to get lost in the silver, because all of a sudden the invisible world is impacting the physical world, which is not really unusual because it happens all the time. But then they get caught in the phenomena. being caught in that phenomena, you're not making it all the way to the end. You know? And it sort of makes me think the angels have silver wings and the archangels always have gold wings. You know, and I remember thinking the gates to heaven, they're always seen as gold, even though it's the pearly gates, because that's this frequency, this bandwidth.
Yeah, I love that. That's interesting. And I remember you've told me too that, as we were just saying, you ask for help. So all of that is accessible to us if we work on our frequency and have that as a goal. I mean, I don't know, I may have misunderstood you, but what I'm thinking is that if that's what we need help with, you know, or if we feel like we're not protecting ourselves enough, because obviously the next question for most people is going to be, well, what do they do now? And I know you see we have that power. Remember that we are empowered beings. Don't give our power away, which I think we do very easily with too
Easily,
much
yep.
social media and buying into stupid fear-based stuff and getting worked up on, where the world is going. And that's completely understandable. We're humans,
Mm-hmm.
but we are also in control of removing what we allow into our frequency, right? So it's about, well, what can I do differently? How can I'm always saying to people, even if it's something like you don't feel very great today, but you have to go to the shops, buy yourself a bunch of flowers and put them in your house. Like something
Yep.
that you can visually just look at and go, that's just beautiful. That will literally raise your frequency in that minute, in that second.
Yep.
So I guess I'm going all over the place here with my question, but my point was, being empowered for ourselves, we can ask and call on those other dimensions to help in whatever way we might feel we need it in that time. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yes, you're totally correct. You can't ask a question if you don't know the subject.
Right.
And this is where some of the game is. Things are being hidden from us, or our awareness is being kept away from certain things, because if we become aware of it, then we'll start asking questions.
Right.
Then we start getting the answers. Uh, in terms of what can people do now, everybody can dance their frequency up anytime they
Mhm.
want.
That sounds
All you
good.
got to do is get that music you like, bang, 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 and dance, and you will raise your frequency up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's everybody can do that anytime. Doesn't matter how good you dance, how bad you dance,
Yeah.
and that's something that you feel. Um, I know a friend of mine. He won't leave his house until he's danced his frequency up because he doesn't want to meet the world in a bad way. Which means sometimes he's late for meetings, which is a funny one.
That's
Um,
great.
but in general, awareness. So there are practitioners like myself, like you, that work to support people in this way. But like you said, buy flowers for yourself. And I always say to clients, do something nice for you.
Exactly.
Something that you wouldn't normally do for yourself, like go get a massage or go to a spa or buy flowers or, you know, dance when no one's watching you, because
Hmm.
it's all about that frequency. The higher the higher vibe we are, the less susceptible we are to suffering. And it's easier to suffer than it is to go through it hard. Like
Yeah.
suffering is a way that someone described me. It's suffering is a hard road to hoe,
Hmm.
but once it's hoed, you can grow vegetables in it. You can
Right.
grow sustenance in it.
Yeah.
There's a richness to it. Um, But if you're going to stay in your low frequency all the time and get trapped in that low energy loop,
Hmm.
um, there's going to be non-stop suffering. You'll define your world as a suffering world. And like you said, Charlie, we get bad news everywhere from everything about everything.
No, I think that's really, really helpful, Daryl, because you know, so much, as we're saying, there's so much out there about you know, how things are so uncertain, where is it going? And I know that there are a lot of positive people talking about the changes, the new earth, the new consciousness, and it's going to be amazing, but we all know we're going to have to go through some pretty heavy shit before it gets there.
Yep.
And of course, that's where the uncertainty comes in. And, as you're saying, that these changes with the dimensional beings, and I think that the most powerful message we can come from this is that there are ways of lifting our frequency. There's people like yourself who, I highly recommend for anyone listening that, you can do a remote healing, you can do a remote change that can, literally change the way you feel from that moment. And to not only that, but even if it's the upkeep, even if it's someone that you need to find in your local area, that you can still do, maintenance of energy healing. They may not know about the actual, the work that you're doing specifically, but after that, they can still maintain their energy. And I think that's just as important as getting your doctor's checkups and your teeth checked. And that's the irony I feel of today's world, is that everyone's so, you got to get your regular checkups on everything, but we don't consider getting a regular checkup on our energy, on it, which is the thing that affects us probably the most dramatically
The
than
most.
anything, because if it's ignored, it will become a physical thing. So,
Yep.
so I think even helping people to focus on that, and saying, well, okay, there's the things I can do at home. There's plenty of practitioners that you can go to have that regular checkup. There's people like yourself who are a lot more experienced in the other, whether it's the darker energies or the what are we calling them?
Dimensionals, the
Yeah,
invisibles.
the little things. I've completely forgotten the word that you used, but getting them removed. So yeah, I think it's been a really, really interesting conversation, and really, I'm hoping really helpful for people to um, think bigger, because really that's what we need to do, isn't it? We really need to think bigger in this realm.
Well, this is again that goes straight back to my healing team saying, step back from your traditional work because there's a bigger picture, and the bigger picture was something I would never have comprehended. It stretched my mind for like how much of this is bullshit now compared to like I've been able to get through so much. But again, for me personally, if I can't practically apply my knowledge right here, right now, it's not really worth anything. So, which is again where I wanted to speak to you about this, Charlie, because if people don't know about it, how do they start asking questions? Um, I was shown this work for a reason, and the reason is that this time is very important in terms of consciousness. We have a really great opportunity to get through our own bullshit and understand our own bullshit so that we can actually evolve psychically or soul wise, however you want to define it. But there needs to be a term of evolution. And that people talk at the age of Aquarius, maybe. The people saying that we're going to disappear into the 5D, which I don't believe. I believe we need to be grounding the 5D to here so that it becomes visible in this world, because it's going to be too easy to disappear off the 5D. But like, who wants to do that when there's chocolate cake here? There's sunbaking. There's fun things you can do here that you can't do in 5D. But if you bring down the 5D to here, the things that you can do here become so much more tastier, so much more beautiful, and such a deeper experience as well.
Yeah, I love
Chocolate
that.
cake's always the easy one.
I'm,
Everyone likes.
yeah, we're
Everyone
not
likes.
missing out on chocolate cake, that's for sure.
Uh,
There are the good parts of being human, right?
Being human's a wonderful thing. Like
Absolutely.
we have our senses. We get to smell flowers and
Mhm.
plants. We get
Yeah,
we get to experience things. There's
exactly.
few people I know that have expressed that spirit says to them, like, what's it like to eat a chocolate cake? So there's a lot out there.
Hmm.
There's a lot with us, and there's a lot more that we can actually discover and experience. as well, without it being all esoteric and
Yeah,
gatekeepers and all that kind of stuff.
exactly, exactly. I think that's a fantastic conversation, and I urge people, anyone watching this, no matter when it is, um, to leave comments, and if you do have more questions, leave them in the comments
Yep.
because I'm sure Daryl will be happy to answer them. I'll respond and let him know if he's not there, so you can at least get some answers from some questions. And if you have big enough questions that we need to come back and answer them, we're of course more than happy to do that for anyone that's
Yeah,
watching. It's
please,
literally
people,
yeah,
ask questions. If you don't understand, we can try and explain it in a way that can be understood.
yeah.
Because it's really all about living a decent life, enjoying a decent life, regardless of what you're seeing in the news and how other people are reacting, um, and having a sense of well-being,
Hmm.
because our lives are too short to suffer all the time.
That's
We
it.
do deserve a bit of fun.
Exactly. Is there anything that you feel like we didn't, that you didn't cover or you didn't raise or you didn't bring up that needs to be said in this moment? Or what's coming up
I
before we?
would, I would personally, I'd be very interested for, yeah, for people to one to ask questions, but also, I just want to know that I'm available about this information.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not being told because I'm anyone special. Maybe I have a skill set that helps me ground it
Hmm.
and be practical on it. But this isn't just for me. It's not just for spiritual people. It's for everybody on the planet. It's for everybody that wants to know, everybody that's looking for change. Um, and like I said, if you don't know the subject, you can't ask the questions. So
Hmm.
here's the subject, bring in the questions, because
Beautiful.
then all of us become more educated
Yeah.
in the situation that we're all involved with.
Excellent. I agree. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts and all the messages that you've been given. I think it's um yeah, as someone who struggles with those things myself, I know how important it is. You have to get yourself out of the way, be like, I'm not sure if I should share this because, it's a little bit out there. And it's like, it's actually not about you. This is about everyone else. So thank you for doing that, for taking the courage to say, right, we need to share this message. I'm happy to help and share this as best as I can. And yeah, thank you again. And as said, please, I'll put Daryl's details in the comments below. Please leave questions. We'd love to hear from you what you thought of this message. And as Daryl said,
Yep.
any questions that come up. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. And thank you,
Oh,
Daryl.
Charlie, thank you so much for having me on and letting me explain this stuff, because there was a while there I had no idea how I could express something that is, for me, stretch the imagination, let
Exactly.
alone, and our heads have been in this space for a while.
That's it.
So, and if something new, it's always fun.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charlie.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.